Hey there, guys. I have Gabe here again. We were talking about bipolar disorder and a ton of other topics. Today, I want to talk about the difference between bipolar disorder and BPD, which, believe it or not, is not bipolar disorder, which some people do think. So I'm going to let Gabe give a short intro to who he is, and then we're going to get right into this topic.
Awesome. My name is Gabe Howard. I wrote the book Mental Illness is an Asshole and Other Observations, which you can get on Amazon. You can also get a signed copy with free swag by going to my website, gabehoward.com. I also host the podcast Inside Bipolar with me and a board-certified psychiatrist. So you get both the lived experience patient view and the medical review. It's like one-stop shopping.
So the reason I made this video was because I, at one point in my journey as a mental health advocate, knew about bipolar disorder, but did not know about BPD or borderline personality disorder. And when I used to see people make comments on my videos, because I'm a mental illness content creator, which means people come and tell me, hey, I have bipolar disorder, I have BPD. When people would comment things about BPD, I used to think it was bipolar disorder, which, thinking about it logically now, I'm like, why would they take the P in the middle of the word to make it shorter? But
I was going to point that out, but yeah, that I'm shocked, but yes, a lot of people think that BPD is the shortened version of bipolar disorder, but it's not. It's borderline personality disorder.
And I think part of the confusion that comes into play here is they both are they both mood disorders, or is BPD a personality disorder?
So this is where it gets complicated. They're classified in all sorts of different ways, but you've got a personality disorder versus a mood disorder. Both are in the DSM-5. They both have different criteria. Borderline doesn't respond to medication, but bipolar disorder does. There are just lots and lots of differences, but here's basically all you need to know. They're not the same thing in any way.
Okay.
They are two unique diagnoses that have different treatment modalities, and nothing could be more separated. And honest to God, this is Gabe Howard's opinion. I want to be very clear. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a researcher, but I honestly believe that the only reason there is confusion is because people think that BPD on comments and on the internet, etc., means bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I think if borderline personality disorder was called something completely different, nobody would ever mix up the two.
And that's completely fair, because like I said, that was my initial confusion with it. Can you give, like you just said, you're not a doctor, you're not a psychiatrist. As someone living with bipolar disorder, can you explain just the basic difference between the two, how they're separated? Because there is issues regulating mood involved with both, correct? So
yeah,
kind of explain the difference between the two.
So in a way, Kody, the best way to explain the differences is maybe more to explain the similarities.
Okay.
And so I apologize for flipping your question, but I think the audience will understand this more. The similarities lie in the mania, the grandiosity, and the racing thoughts. So one of the hallmarks of borderline personality disorder is this tendency towards drama, this tendency to have real big emotions, real deep feelings, to feel that everything is about you personally, and to have difficulty separating out those gigantic emotions. Now move over to bipolar disorder, and you can see in mania, you think the whole world revolves around you. In grandiosity, you believe that you are the greatest. And what happens is that becomes drama. Because, for example, if you're feeling manic and you're king of the world and somebody challenges you, you fight with them. That creates drama. Now, the difference is in the mechanism, right? They say people with borderline personality seek out drama. I think that's sort of an insulting thing to say, but that's the way that it's looked at. Whereas people with bipolar disorder get mixed up in drama, which is kind of, I guess, a cleaner marketing way that makes people with bipolar disorder sound better. Here's the reality. Both people with borderline personality and people experiencing bipolar mania, bipolar grandiosity, bipolar hypomania, we get involved in drama. And that drama has a very, very specific look that everybody responds to. And that is a through line between the two illnesses. Bipolar disorder will keep going. So here are the differences. Bipolar disorder has suicidal depression. But here's the thing. People with borderline often experience suicidal depression because as their illness progresses and they feel more and more isolated, and they get a lot of stigma and discrimination, and there's all kinds of medical people who will not help them. So then they end up experiencing like a major depressive episode, which is sort of a hallmark of borderline personality and sort of not. It kind of leads to another problem. And this is where it gets very, very complicated, and why I do want to remind everybody, I am not a doctor. If we had a doctor here, they could give you the actual medical diagnoses of these things where one translates into another. I'm just sort of giving you the 30,000 foot view of where people get confused. But this is the real hallmark. People over on the borderline personality disorder, they're not going to have these big mood swings. They're probably not going to have mania, because if they start having big mood swings, mania, hypersexuality, grandiose, then they're going to start leaning over into bipolar disorder. The last thing that I will say is you can be diagnosed with both.
I actually didn't know that.
You can have borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder. They're often separated out, and there are some doctors who won't put them together, don't think they should be together. Again, this is where mental health is messy, because there's no blood test or cheek swab or hair, urine, DNA test, etc. But you can have hallmarks of both disorders at the same time. And be treated for both.
So you can be diagnosed with both.
Yes.
Do you have experience with that?
So sort of. I was not diagnosed with both borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder. However, I had drama was following me around because I thought I was God. I really can't. I want to be as honest as I can. I thought I was king of the world and the world revolved around me, but I didn't hit all the markers for narcissism. And my therapist said, you really just think that everything is about you. And she recommended dialectical behavioral therapy, which is one of the frontline treatments for borderline personality disorder. Now, I was not diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and I do not have borderline personality disorder, but DBT helped me immensely. So in this way, this has become a trend since this happened to me, where a lot of people with bipolar disorder are getting real benefits with dialectical behavioral therapy, which was created for people with borderline personality disorder. So I think that becomes another through line, right? If, when I went, I had bipolar disorder, but there was a lot of people in the room with borderline personality disorder. Well, as the number of people with bipolar disorder starts to rise who are getting benefit of that, when you go to DBT, you're going to see a lot of people with both borderline or bipolar. And that starts to create the idea that maybe there's more in common here.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that's part of the misconception where people really have difficulty understanding it. I was interviewed with another person who has BPD, and one of the things I found really interesting that I heard, and you just mentioned a little bit ago, they were being refused treatment by certain doctors and psychiatrists. They wouldn't take them on as a patient because of BPD. Can you explain that at all? Or?
So on one hand, I can't explain it because it's just terrible. You've got a sick person who is sick, but yet you don't want to help them.
And you can agree because you see the diagnosis, and that's why you're refusing to see them.
Exactly. So here's the reality. One of the hallmarks of borderline personality disorder, which is a symptom of the disorder, is this seeking out drama. To put that more plainly, it could look like doing things like getting angry at your provider and filing a complaint against them, filing a lawsuit against them, calling their boss, smearing them online, getting angry with them because you misunderstood them, having those big emotions, not knowing how to handle it, and spending the week in between your appointment tracking them down, writing them letters, following them around, screaming at them and yelling at them. And it becomes very, very difficult if you are a provider to deal with that. And while I do have compassion for the provider that doesn't want to get 800 phone calls in their home from somebody who is experiencing a mental health crisis, I also, as a mental health advocate, say, this is a potential outcome of this disorder, and you're not doing anything to help them because you've decided that it's too much trouble or it's not worth it. If treatment is available, people with borderline personality disorder, they live great lives and they do very, very well. It's a difficult illness to manage. It's a time-consuming illness to manage. But the very fact that we already have a shortage of psychiatrists and therapists and treatment providers, and the fact that this is such a stigmatized disorder, makes my heart go out to people with borderline personality disorder, because one of the things that makes this hard is a potential core belief of somebody who has been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder is that people don't care about them. And then they see this in black and white. that they cannot get treatment because a medical community has discriminated and stigmatized against them. And it's sort of hard to say, no, it's your disorder that is making you think that nobody cares about you. And they're like, here it is in black and white. And that makes their treatment even more difficult.
Yeah.
That said, I do want to say I understand the medical community's concern. That is a valid concern, and I'm not sure what the answer is. I know that if I went to medical school and I had my license suspended because I got 800 phone calls because all of my patients got mad at me because I had to deliver a hard truth, and make no mistake, therapy is all about delivering hard truths.
Yep.
And there's never a bigger opportunity for misunderstanding than dropping that truth bomb. I can sort of understand where they're coming from. They got student loans, they got families, they got bills. So I'm thankful that there's people out there who understand it, can find the safeguards that can put in. But my heart just goes out to people who are sick that can't get help because of a symptom of their illness.
Wow. Yeah. And like I said, I've had the opportunity to work with some people with BPD, and it really frustrates me when we talk about like the not being able to get care, because all I can imagine is, people with bipolar and schizophrenia. Imagine that one of our disorders, people were just like, I don't want to deal with people with schizophrenia because they get delusional and they get paranoid, and they're like, that makes me feel unsafe. Who's going to help us then,
Right.
And like, I think it's probably, like you said, it's probably a little bit easier because they know that medication can be more effective for disorders like ours and maybe help manage it a bit more. But the people with BPD need help too. So it's really frustrating, but that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you today and kind of talk about the difference between bipolar and BPD. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I do want to let my followers know that at some point, I'm also going to have a conversation with someone with BPD as well. So that way we can learn more about borderline personality disorder from that side too. But I still wanted to have the conversation of how they relate, why they're confused. And that's why I asked Gabe to have this conversation today. So thanks again for coming on. And be sure to leave any questions or comments you have down below. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening, and we will see you guys another time.